When my brother Matt and I were growing up in Eastern Virginia, we came to realize there were two types of parents. There was the type of parent that Sunday after Sunday would take their children to Sunday school and church. Then there was the second type of parent that would send their children to Sunday school and church. We had that second type of parent. Now, we had heard rumor of a third type of parent where nobody went to church, but we weren't allowed to know anybody like that. Still, I was the kid that was not going to let my parents get away with it. Every Sunday, I would be right in front of my mom, and I'd be saying, how come we have to go? How come we have to go? How come we have to go? How come you don't have to go? And she would say, now, Anthony, we talked about this, Anthony. You know we talked about this. Ray, fix his tie. Ray, tell him why we don't have to go. I'd go see my dad. He'd say, now, son, we talked about this. You see, as a kid, your gas tank is empty. Now, my dad was an auto mechanic his entire life, but I think he understood the world better than most people. However, if he was going to explain that world to you, it was usually in terms of a car. So he said, now, son, me and your mama, when we were kids, we always had to go to church and Sunday school. So now that we're adults, our tank is full. And I'd say, well, Grandma and Pop still go, Grandma and Pop still go. They're adults. He'd say, well, yeah, they're adults. But as you get older, it's always a good idea to go back and top off. Top off? Why you got to top off? And he'd say, well, because as you get older, you start to lose your religion. And I'd say, well, what makes you lose your religion? This is usually when my mom would jump back in. She would say, having kids? Now get out there. Grandma and Pop be here in a minute. Grandma and Pop be here in a minute. We'd head outside. Grandma and Pop would pick us up in this old green Dodge. Sunday after Sunday, they would take us to church, bring us home. When we got home, run into the house, change out of Sunday clothes into play clothes, run back outside, get on our bikes, ride down to Grandma and Pop's. They had this old farmhouse. And I use the word old because parts of it were built before the Civil War. And I use the word parts because it just looked like it had been added onto 100 times. But you enter that house by the back porch and you open the door to the kitchen. When you open that door to the kitchen, there it was, set out on the table before you, Sunday dinner, the way it should be. Sunday dinner, I'm not talking about Sunday supper, Sunday lunch, Sunday breakfast, or Sunday brunch. I am talking about Sunday dinner. In the middle of that table, 2 plates, one heaped over with fried chicken, the other a good salty Smithfield ham. Behind that, you're going to have vegetables from the garden. You're going to have green beans, butter beans, snap beans, corn, and carrots. Beside that, you're going to have bowls of greens, all cooked in ham grease the way they should be. You're going to have turnip greens and collard greens and cabbage and spinach. Beside that, you're going to have the canned goods, pickled peaches, pickled pear, pickled watermelon rind, pickled cucumber. Grandma's rule on that farm, if it didn't move, she pickled it, stuck it in a jar with some vinegar. And then my favorite of those was called the chow chow. Little tiny jar chow chow. Met a lot of folks who don't know what chow chow is. Chow chow is a relish that you would never waste on a hot dog. Good stuff. Then my favorite part of the meal. Beside the chow chow was a little tiny clear glass, crystal cut cruet of vinegar. Some folks know what to do with that vinegar. You take your cabbage, your collards, you put them on one side of the plate. You coat them with that vinegar. You take your knife, you slide it up the other side of your plate. Create that vinegar floodplain so it doesn't back up into the rest of your food. That's how you eat. Now, you take this meal I just described. You set beside it a tall glass of fresh brewed sweet iced tea, and you are in heaven, and you did not have to die or behave to get there. That's how Sunday dinner should be. Now, in the 10 minutes it had taken us to change our clothes, ride our bikes down to Grandma's and Pop's, Grandma had laid out this amazing meal. That was her job. She did it every Sunday. She was very good at her job. Pop had 3 jobs. Pop cut the ham. Nobody else cut the ham but Pop. Pop said grace. Nobody else said grace but Pop. Pop was the storyteller. He was the entertainer. He kept us kids laughing. Now, I want to give you an example of Pop's sense of humor. When I was a little kid, I was that little kid that could not pronounce any word with the letter R. I would stick in a W. I really would. That's how I would talk. And when I was about that age, and something happened at Sunday dinner that had just never happened before. I reached for the little cruet of vinegar, and it was empty. I said, "Grandma, we're out of vinegar." And she says, "Well, land sakes, I didn't know that." She said, "Let me go in the pantry and get you some more." I've met a lot of folks, kids today especially, who don't know what a pantry is. Pantry, that room at your grandparents' house behind the kitchen that is just stock full of food in case the depression ever comes back. That's what a pantry is. So she's back there looking, and finally she says, Howard, I thought we had some vinegar. Do you know where there's some vinegar?" And my grandfather began to smile. He said, "Eileen, look on the bottom shelf in the back." And then you hear, "Well, land sakes, I didn't know that was here." And she came out, and she's carrying it, the big gallon jug, the clear glass gallon jug of vinegar, back when it had a cork and not even a little metal spinny top. She took it over to the sink. She got the cruet. She's so careful pouring it in there. I'm watching her, but I'm also watching Pop. Pop is now grinning. He is grinning like a possum with a pound of persimmons. I should have paid more attention. Grandma hands me that vinegar. I put it on my cabbage, took my fork, stuck it in my mouth. Now, I don't know if you've ever had this happen, but that fork transformed. It transformed into a pair of jumper cables. They clamped down on my tongue. My body stiffened out. Now, some folks have already figured out what happened. To play a joke on me, my grandfather was willing to give up his hiding spot, his hiding place for his moonshine, his whiskey, his hooch. And so now my body is stiffened out, and Grandma's going, "Anthony, what's wrong? What's wrong?" And I says, "It's Wotten. It's Wotten vinegar." And she says, "No, child, I just opened it. It was brand new. It was full to the top." I said, "No, Grandma, it's Wotten." And then she said something I couldn't argue with. She says, "Honey, it must be your imagination." And I thought for a second. It had to be my imagination. You see, every report card I had ever brought home from school always had the same two words: active imagination. Plus, nobody in their right mind would create something tasting like this, so I took my fork and had an even bigger bite. Now, according to Encyclopedia Britannica, there's over 5,000 taste buds on the human tongue. There was a mass suicide inside my mouth. My inside started turning over and over. My body began to sweat from places I didn't know humans could sweat. My eyes glazed over, and what was left of my tongue was now beating itself against the side of my mouth, I thought trying to knock itself out. And through my glazed eyes, I look over, I see Pop rolling out of his chair laughing, and I see Grandma's finger coming up out of that cruet to have a taste. I said, "No, Grandma, it's Wotten vinegar." To this day, I cannot go to a family reunion or a family supper without somebody offering me Wotten vinegar.